All right, it is time for the John Riggins Show. We are definitely in the lazy, hazy, crazy, hot as hell days of summer, John. We all got a little cocky about a week ago. It felt good out there. The cicadas were gone. But the temperature is back in rare form, and, they're going to play some football tomorrow night. So here's Riggo.
All righty, Todd. Since we last did a podcast, I believe I have turned 72 years old.
You sure have. You sure have.
It up. Nothing good about that. The reason I brought it up was I wanted to make the comment. A good friend of mine who used to be he was a free safety and punt returner for the New York Jets, Chris Farasopoulos. And he contacted me on my birthday, wished me happy birthday. And I told him, I said, I can remember seeing pictures of my father, and I remember his dad as well. I met him years ago. He grew up in Torrance, California. That when I first got into the league, my dad was, in his early 50s, I would guess, 71. Yeah, he was probably 54, 55 years old. And I remember photographs of him. I remember one particular when we were down in the Blue River with my brothers launching a boat, and he would have been about 56 or 57, and that picture's still in my mind. And what's interesting is that he looked old in that photograph at 56 or 57. I'm now 72. It's kind of hard to put that stuff together. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I'm thinking, well, maybe he just looked old, and maybe that generation of people were more somber or whatever, and so they acted old, made you think they were old. I don't know, but I don't feel as old as he looked, and yet I'm 14 years, around 14 years.
We always remember our parents as always being old.
And people in the town you grow up in, somebody that was 70 years old in Centralia.
You were ancient.
Oh, it was like this. Any moment now, somebody's going to have to call Louis Hayes, who was.
Now you're feeling, Louis, pretty good.
Louis was the funeral director in Centralia. Any minute now, he's over 70. He could go.
If Louis came a-calling.
Yeah. So anyway, I had that. Oh, and this weekend, I had the very fortunate was able to go out and visit with Robert Duvall. Not that I was part of a deal with the Special Forces that they have a charity. And Robert Duvall, bless his heart, at age 90, was able to have all these guests. When I say all, there's about, I don't know, maybe a little bit less than a dozen people out there. He had a dinner for everybody, and it was, he's got a great place out in
the Plains?
Yeah, I don't guess I'm not going to say. Actually, I couldn't find it. I don't think I could if he had me, go again, although I do have the directions. But I didn't want to give away his 1020, as the truck drivers say. But yeah, I mean, this guy, he's a classic, really. I have another good friend of mine who sent me this hat on my birthday, by the way. His name is Tom Spitznagel, and it's kind of interesting because Robert Duvall is any man. You know what I mean? It's just like the characters he plays. He really is that guy.
The American any man, yeah.
He is.
That's a great way to put it.
He's not aloof. He's not standing. He's very down to earth. Tells you what's on his mind. What you see is what you get. Tom Spitznagel, this friend of mine, met him about 25, 30 years ago in Scotland. He was over there with some of his friends playing golf, and I guess I should say Bob because I was calling him Mr. Duvall, and he goes, "Call me Bob. It's Bob." So I call him Bob. Actually, somebody else was calling him Bobby. I said, I don't think I'm there yet. I think his wife calls him Bobby, but anyway. So he met him and he went up and just because he was enamored with Lonesome Dove, where he played Gus McCall, who was one of the two partners in the cattle operation that when they drove those cattle in Montana. By the way, great book. It's a very good read if you want to break that back out. But he said he was just the same guy. I mean, very approachable. Now, the rumors are on his co-star in that, Tommy Lee Jones, not so much.
Oh.
Tommy Lee Jones got a little bit of an edge.
The mini Riggo?
The mini Riggo. Makes sense, too. Anyway.
I challenge people to take the Tommy Lee Jones Riggo voice test. Maybe we'll do that one day, and you pick out who is who, because there are certain movies that he is in, your voices are indistinguishable.
It's funny you should say that. It's, first of all, at the dinner on Saturday night, one of the guests came up and said, you sound like Tommy Lee Jones. So I've just recently heard it. I get it quite a bit. Haven't heard. That was the first time I'd heard it in quite some time. But to give you an example, I'd always go, oh, whatever, like, okay. And then people say, and I think it's the voice, they start telling you look like Tommy Lee Jones, you know? So like
There's certain things, like in The Fugitive, it's like, all right, we need a perimeter and 8 miles, every outhouse, chicken house, barn house.
Exactly. Well, the movie Natural Born Killers with Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis, I think she was the other co-star in that. There was a soundtrack to that, and Robert Downey Jr. was in it as well, and he played the warden in this prison. And so I got that wrong.
Robert Downey Jr.?
Robert Downey Jr. was the reporter that was reporting, and Tommy Lee Jones was the warden in this prison. So I don't even remember people, mate, that go back far enough when I was living in a warehouse out in Chantilly. So one night, I'd had about, 4 or 5 or 6 or a dozen beers. I don't remember how many. But I had enough to where my mind wasn't like in a normal state, you might say. So I'm playing the soundtrack from Natural Born Killers. And in that soundtrack, all of a sudden you hear they start talking because there's the prison scene where they're walking through the prison and Tommy Lee Jones is talking to Robert Downey Jr. And I'm going to tell you something, Todd. He starts talking, and I don't know. It was just the fact that my brain was, was twisted enough by the alcohol.
Were you channeling him?
I was stunned. I'm going, oh my God, that is right. People tell me I sound like this, but then I say, well, actually, he sounds like me. Because I was on the scene first. Nobody knew who Tommy Lee Jones was.
No, that's true.
Before they knew who John Riggins was.
That's true.
John Riggins was on the beat in 71. Tommy Lee Jones came much later.
There you go.
I don't know much later, but he was definitely.
I got to ask you, so Robert Duvall, Bob, some guys called him Bobby. What did he call you? Hey, Riggo. Or did you say, I'd like to be called the Diesel or El Riggo or what?
If you say that again, you have to leave. No, not you. He was telling that. I don't remember. I just think he just commented what I had to say. But one thing I forgot to ask him, and he might have known this only because he worked with some of these directors. And I was going to tell him and get his opinion on it. But in 1973 is when I had the Mohawk haircut. And I think later that year, or later the next year, 74, I got to look this up. I got a feeling Robert De Niro stole that.
Taxi Driver.
I think he stole it. I've always wondered I was curious to see if he would have said, I have no idea.
That was about a year or two after, right?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean,
it was right there about that same time.
That would make a lot of sense.
Well, let's face it, I was big in New York at that time because the Daily News loved me. There was pictures of me all the time with the mohawk on the back page, the big back page or whatever. Yeah, they liked it. So anyway, and he's a New York guy, but yeah, it was a good weekend. Had a lot of fun out at his place. Much respect for Robert De Niro for Robert Duvall.
Bobby Duvall.
Yes.
I can't think of anything bad that he's been in. He's just one of those guys that he's that good in my opinion.
Not only that, he's a heck of a singer and guitar player. We just watched it last night. He got an Academy Award for the movie Tender Mercies, about a country western singer who overcomes alcoholism and a divorce, and then he finally finds a woman with a son, and he plays that guy. But he got an Academy Award for that, and I watched it last night, and he sings all of his own songs in this thing. I didn't know that when we went out to visit with him. That he had been. But when I was curious to know, because I knew he'd gotten an Academy Award, but I didn't know what it was for, and I looked it up, and it was that movie back in 1982, I think it was, or 84.
Yeah, I remember, but I have not seen that movie, and then I kind of, having not seen it, and then not understanding that, a lot of times it's a stunt double or it's post production. He did it all, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting, and I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I remember the character, but I think Jeff Bridges won an Academy Award about 7, 8, 9 years ago. A very similar part. His character was named Bad Blake or something like that. Do you remember this with Maggie Geigendahl or whatever?
Gyllenhaal?
Yeah, that he played a country western singer who was an alcoholic, and so it's basically the same role. It's funny how Academy Awards go a lot of times also to impersonations.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't get it. They go, oh, well, you can go right through it. I think Jamie Foxx, he impersonated
Ray Charles.
He got an Academy Award. The South African actress,
Charlize Theron.
She got it for impersonating the serial murderer woman, obviously. And that was basically all due to the makeup people.
Sure.
Because they...
then you had Rain Man.
when he was actually
Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise.
And there's I know Forrest Whitaker. He got an Academy Award for impersonating who? Idi Amin. The last king.
Big Dada.
The last king of Scotland. But and I think there's a couple more.
In the immortal words of Robert Downey Jr.
Who cares?
No, never go full retard.
Never what?
Never go full retard when he was.
There you go. Never go full retard.
What was it?
Something Thunder.
Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder.
A movie that still makes you laugh no matter how
That's
many times
right up there with Caddyshack.
It is.
You know, where you go, you just ain't expecting what you're going to see.
There's so many one-liners. And Simple Jack with Ben Stiller.
And Ben Stiller, just by looking at Ben Stiller, you can break up laughing before he says a word. They are funny guys.
I'm glad you had a great weekend celebrating the 72nd birthday.
Yes.
And, let's go ahead. I've got one thing we're going to get into because it's about beer. And let's face it.
Let's get into some beer.
Let's face it. You're in the Beer Hall of Fame, too, okay? Your first ballot, there's no denying. You're in a couple of Hall of Fame.
I should be. And the reason I say that is I'm 50% Czech. Have you checked the last time to see exactly what the beer consumption around the world, how it goes?
Oh, the per capita, you guys dominate.
I mean, it's like Czechs, 150 liters per year per capita. And then I think the next runner-up is like Austria, or it's not Germany. I don't know. It could be Ireland. They're like 99. We're talking about 50% more than anybody else. I mean, Czechs wake up. They drink low alcohol beer, though. I did a little research on it.
Yeah, that would make sense.
They're not knocking back the IPAs. They go with their. They go with the four. But
the
then
gross
again,
domestic product is way.
But then again, if you go with low alcohol all day as opposed to strong beer at the end,
if you're putting it on your Cheerios, you might have an issue.
And I'm sure they do.
All right, we're going to throw a chart up here.
Okay.
So, Riggo, I think this is not necessarily by coincidence because we did miss this, but do you realize that the first Friday of August is International Beer Day, which right around your birthday, so I just think the stars are aligned here.
Hall of Fame weekend.
The Hall of Fame weekend.
And what you said,
International Beer Day. International Beer. So we missed it on Friday, August 6th here. So in our little slide up here, here's what is amazing. How many craft breweries do you think are in America right now? Because we've seen the explosion here in the last 10 years, 5 in particular. And
as I was following this, and it goes back about 8 or 9 years, there was like a couple thousand, and then you'd read it the next year there was over 3,000. I believe it got up to a point where there was close to 5,000 breweries in the United States.
And 8,764 last year, craft breweries.
See, I haven't checked it in so long.
They produced 23 million barrels of beer in 2020.
Now, this is the craft breweries.
The craft breweries.
Not the big boys.
Not the big boys. But to show you how big the big boys are, that AB InBev, which is the largest, they produce nearly 17 times that than all the craft beers. AB InBev, just the one big boy, 17 times more than the craft brewers in of themselves.
The 8,000 craft brewers.
Yep.
Although there's a lot of brands underneath.
And so as the big boys are gobbling up the popular ones that come up, from a Devil's Backbone to, some of the bigger ones you used to know from Sierra Nevada that started out similarly in nature. Yeah. But the other point of this, in this particular slide, is so the beer output from AB InBev, they dominated 25.7% of the marketplace, and that's your Budweiser, your Corona, your Beck's, your Stella Artois, Busch, and Modelo. Then next up is Heineken at 12.2%, and some of the different brands, Carlsberg and China Resources, followed by Miller Coors, only 4.6%.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Right, and they've got Foster's, and then Qingdao, which is a good Chinese beer. I've always enjoyed that beer. But it's fascinating that even amongst the big boys, that how they still dominate, and in this crowded marketplace of great news is beer production, and you like to see. I'm always rooting for the little guys and the microbreweries around here that we support.
Right, but you know what's weird is for that. I don't know. Maybe that you would think then maybe that Americans would be a little bit higher up on the the per capita beer consumption. But I suppose a lot of this is Stella Artois. I'm guessing comes from what, Belgium? Where it is? Is that a Belgian beer?
I believe that is correct, John.
So that's an import, but at the same time, like take the beer that I drink now, Pilsner Urquell. Czech Republic, they're the ones that originally started the Pilsner style of lager. And they've completely changed everything that they've done. But everybody's got, their market is Europe for the most part. Mm-hmm. They don't mess with the United States. I forget.
I tell you what, about 15 years ago, they made a push into this country. And they actually did some advertising with us on some of my old radio stations here. And they had a significant campaign to introduce it to here. Because, I've always enjoyed that beer.
Well, they made some changes, too. They started years ago when this beer came here, and that's one of the things I noticed. And Heineken is still like that, I think. You know how you talk about how beer gets a skunky flavor to it?
Right.
And a little bit of that may have to do with the fact that the old Pilsner Urquell was in green bottles.
Mm-hmm.
Heineken is in a green bottle. Well, Sun obviously has an effect on wine, beer, and that's why the bottles a lot of times are clouded like green bottles and what. But Pilsner Urquell went to a brown bottle, which is more effective against getting, and that's
that
what
kind
was
of
going
deterioration.
On. And the other part was that they started shipping the beer cold. In other words, keeping it cold. That's one. And Coors, if I'm not mistaken, one of their things is their beer is supposedly, except when it sets out on your rack. I guess it'd have to be their keg beer, but then maybe everybody's keg beer is kept cold the whole time. That's the secret. The better quality of the beer, the quality in a beer, what my understanding is, and I'm not a beer expert, so I probably shouldn't even say it.
I think you are.
Has to do with the freshness of the beer. Mm-hmm. The fresher the beer, the better, the higher quality, and then it depends on what you put into it. But that's pretty interesting. So the beer International Beer Day passed us by. I got to remember. Is it on the same day every year?
It's the first Friday. Of August. So you got to figure it's always going to be right around your birthday. So note to self.
I got to look this up exactly.
Note to self, and we'll have a special next time. We'll have some beverages here. Maybe we'll do a live on air sampling, if you will, of because man, that Czech bar. You've got some hell of a lagers and some of the Czechoslovakian beers and the European beers. So can't go wrong with the beers.
No.
All right, John, hard to believe here in the dog days of summer/August here. Washington football team back at it.
Yeah.
First game tomorrow night at Gillette Stadium against the New England Patriots, 7:30. Woohoo! You excited?
Well, I didn't give it a hee-haw, hee-haw.
Mine was forced.
Maybe a hee-haw, hee-haw.
All right, Eeyore.
Well, it's kind of like this. Actually, and it was true years ago. Once again, the preseason means nothing, and I still, for the life of me, and maybe I don't get it, that there are still those coaches. But I think it's just PR that they put out. I don't think anybody believes it, that the games mean anything. It's just like a practice. I mean, more so nowadays than ever before, I think, to try to take any meaning away from a other than to watch a guy play, and particularly younger players, or maybe an older player who you're thinking, I don't know.
They still have any gas left in the tank?
Exactly. Other than that, that's all it is. Everybody's out there scrambling, trying to get a job.
Is it kind of akin to the sound effects you just made to find out who the donkeys are versus the thoroughbreds? Mm-hmm. Who may be good for it, especially the younger players, to figure out is the speed of the game?
I've always, by the way, you bring up something kind of interesting. Now, defensively speaking, and nowadays I'm sure it's so much more sophisticated than in times gone by. But it always seems like an offense has got a little bit more sophisticated nomenclature, or there's more of it than, say, defense. I don't know that for a fact because I've never played defense, and I'm sure they've got a bunch of JP5 words that they use all the time and different coverages and all this stuff. And so it's plenty complicated. But the speed of the game, I don't really think has anything to do with foot speed. And it does in a way, but I've always thought it's like, particularly for somebody on offense, it really is it's getting out of your head, and it's almost like acting and just reacting out on a football field. And when you get to that level, then the speed of the game, because like anything else, when you're thinking, like they say, if you're in your head, you're a half step behind everybody. And so to me, I've always thought that's what the speed of the game was. But then again, I was a world-class sprinter, so I wouldn't know. I wasn't. I might have been. No, I couldn't. Well, maybe. I don't know. I'm going to hang on to that one.
You pretty much were, but you've always talked about the difference between, you can't even imagine, exhibition preseason games versus regular season games versus playoffs versus Super Bowls, and how you have always lamented the unbelievable differences through all of those.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, and that's you bring up a very good point, because it really got, and as you play the game, and if you play it long enough, and I swear, somebody like Tom Brady, I don't know what to make of his mental outlook when I say that for him to want to keep doing this at his age. Unfortunately for him, though, he's been in a position where, and maybe that's the key, is that he has been in the ultimate game so often that he goes to camp thinking, why not another time? Why not another MVP in the Super Bowl?
He's pushing boundaries, John. He is pushing boundaries for a guy
it's
winning
at
this age. And you talk about, we were talking about age at the beginning of this. He was never this phenomenal athlete where we're sitting back and going, he lost his arm strength and he can't run anymore. He can't do this.
Well, he never could run.
Right. It's all up here, right?
Well, the part that's up here is how he can continue to convince himself that this is really important, my life's work, and it's
I want to do it.
Yes, I'm going after a while. Well, let me back that up, because you just went through exhibition games and the regular season and then the playoffs. I found at the tail end of my career, it really was. The regulars. Once we got to a Super Bowl and won it, that in 1983, it was after that. It was like regular season. A Cowboys occasionally national televised game. I think that's what performers. And that's what I consider myself more than a football player. You like the attention. You want as big a crowd watching as you can, because you feed off that energy. That's what gives you the goosebumps and takes you to the next level. But and it finally got to where it like I said, my last couple of years, it was the regular season games was like, we got to get through this. They had turned into exhibition games, right, in a weird sort of way.
Right.
So all you want to do is play in the postseason. Now, if you could play in the postseason constantly, which is not realistic, that'd be a different situation where you had that kind of attention, and the whole football world is now only watching a handful of games week to week. So, yeah, I just don't, and the other part of this is, from my take on it, and I was telling this to some of the guests out at Robert Duvall's house, I got to a point which was neither good nor bad, I guess, where on the one hand, I looked at it, the coaches, and I actually knew from enough experience of playing running back in the NFL, there was nobody who was going to tell me. If there was I knew the screw up before anybody was going to point it out. I knew it in my head the moment it happened on the football field. He didn't need to tell me, hey, what would or I ran past a hole where I could have gotten a hell of a lot more yards. I already knew it. So I was in a unique position, and I think the running back position, from my perspective, is like that. It can't really be coached.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some things, I guess, maybe Mike Shanahan's theory of what is it, like 1-2 steps and cut or whatever it was, I forget. His offense is designed this way that you have to make a break. I have no idea. I never played in anything like that. Nobody ever told me. But I always figured it's basically when they hand you the ball, make something happen. That was, no matter what they did, defenses are doing stuff, and this is what we're going to do. You see this 56 front or whatever it is, this is the way we're going to block. And I go, yeah, okay, whatever you say.
Well, it's vision and read and react, right?
Exactly.
And it's improvisation.
Exactly. It's all improv.
Because every play, you don't know what's coming at you. Who did their job, who did it incredibly, and who failed.
Yeah, and that's what it got down to, at least for me. And I've always been curious to ask other running backs. I never do when I see them, but I never see them that often. but I'm not sure that everybody had that same approach. Of course, that's the approach of a guy who isn't real ambitious either. I'm not lazy. I'm just not ambitious. I'm thinking, I don't need to cram all this stuff. I don't want to have that in my head. I don't want to be thinking. Just give me the ball. I'll do something. I mean, that was but so it made everything else that you were a part of a machine. I've always thought this too, because now you got me talking about this as far as coaching goes. I don't know where. I'm sure there must be a point for a coach. There's good coaches and there's not so good coaches, right? But to me, I've never really relied on a coach to do anything. I went into a game knowing what my job was and knowing that I had to do it. It like a smart part, if you will, like a smartphone. You put a carburetor, they don't have anymore. Fuel injection is what it is now. No more carburetor. Dating myself. Whatever it may be, the transmission, it's like our bodies, everything. Everything's got a specific purpose. I was a running back. I knew what my specific purpose was. You didn't have to tell me anything. You didn't have to show me anything. I knew at some point what to do and how to do it. And, if I'm not doing it good enough, obviously, you're going to get somebody else anyway. So I've always felt like, well, if I'm going down, I'd rather go down because I failed rather than listen to you, and you got me to fail.
Was there ever a time in your career, and say the difference between when you came in as a rookie versus in the growth, and obviously you enjoyed success. I believe you were the first 1,000-yard rusher for the Jets, and versus with the coach it's saying, okay, if you didn't have that, you needed another set of eyes to maybe help you with technique or certain things.
Well, now this is where I guess I'm talking about actually when they hand you the football, you run with it.
Right.
Obviously, there's things in blocking assignments and picking up and knowing that stuff. Obviously, coaches can tell you, and they will pick it up for you because they know the defenses and all this stuff. And they, if you see, it's always most dangerous man, MDM. If you got a safety that's creeping up and you got the backer that you're supposed to block, well, if they both come, obviously the linebacker is probably your man, but if they both come and the safety's coming up the middle, he'll probably get there first, so you take him, and then the quarterback's on his own because you can't take everybody out. That kind of stuff, yes. That coaching, certainly there was an advantage to having coaches help you along and point stuff like that out. But I was getting back to, though, is really just actually being responsible and owning your job and kind of operating on the premise that if it's not good enough, you'll find somebody else. And that's about all you can do. And that's the way it kind of went down. And that's why this, with this exhibition season coming up here, it literally is, nobody will tell you that because the NFL doesn't want you to know that it's who cares. And yet Vegas, there's still lines on all this stuff.
Oh my gosh. And the ratings.
I don't even get it. How do they not, they don't have any idea who's going to be on that field at the end of the game.
Because we have a gambling problem.
And it's getting worse.
And the floodgates are opening now. So you have two games tomorrow night with the Washington New England game is the first one of
Is that going to be nationally televised?
That is.
It's on
the NFL Network and NBC4 here locally, so it is on the NFL Network.
In that regard, it would be if you got cable. Then
you're going to see Ryan Fitzpatrick. You're going to see some of the first team for a very short period of time. I would imagine we'll see Jamin Davis, the number one pick for the team. See what he looks like out there. They
got three of these.
They have three of these. They have three of these.
So there's going to be a protracted time between the last exhibition game and the beginning of the regular season.
Yeah, Labor Day falls a little later this year, so opening day for the Washington football team is Sunday the 12th. That previous Thursday will be the NFL kickoff season. And the other thing we got to keep an eye on, John, which is a big deal, is the vaccination rates. And who's going to be in and who's going to be out. And you've got some stars in the league that are, some serious quarterbacks that they're not getting vaccinated. So per the Washington Post, as of yesterday, 2 days ago actually now, 86% of Washington's football team's players have had at least one COVID shot. Now that's 28th amongst NFL teams. 59% are fully vaccinated. So that's pretty low.
Who's the most vaccinated? Do you have any idea?
I don't know offhand. Overall, 92% of NFL players have had at least one shot, and 81% are fully vaccinated. So Washington's got 59%.
I was going to say they're one of the least. Well, you said they're 28, right?
Yeah, they've only had one shot. So that is low, and it's something that is real, and you got to keep an eye on because the league's not playing around. And I
don't think they should on that.
No.
I mean, normally I'm against anything the league says to do. But in this case, I'm thinking maybe for once they might be right about something.
The games must go on. So
yeah, this is one of those deals for when talking about vaccinated or not vaccinated. It's like a Supreme Court deal. I mean, on the one hand, you're the employer. It's the way it's always been. Of course, nowadays I guess there's a little bit better relationships with the Players Association. But you're going, look, and there are other companies around the country that are actually telling their employees, you vaccinated or...
Airlines as a perfect example.
Yeah.
Delta or somebody came out, American Airlines came out the other day and said all employees must be vaccinated. 3 airlines came out this morning and said, nope, we're not doing it.
What do you mean? That we're not going to have mandatory?
Not mandating vaccines.
See, there's where
it's different for every industry, for every business, every walk of life, if you will.
This is why judges are what do you call it? That are educated beyond their intelligence. The reason I say that is because it's either one or the other. I want it, I don't want it, and then it's like, who's the best at creating an argument that makes it sound more like this is the right way to go? Because literally, this is like chicken and egg type stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see both arguments, but I also kind of run from the standpoint that you're being very selfish, aren't you? I mean, I don't know.
Right. I think the businesses have the right, and you have the right to not choose. You can't force anybody, but okay. Right, but don't whine and cry and complain about it because you don't feel comfortable about it. Well, I respect that.
But here's
you can't have it both ways.
Well, here's where it gets. Bottom line, I would say is the NFL would say, listen, you're either get both vaccinations or go home and pound sand.
Right.
And guess what? We're not paying you.
Right.
But then they would say, well, you can't do that because it's my right. I have that. That's where I said, that's where you get the Supreme Court or, you get some court involved in this. And it just depends on who. There's no right answer here.
'Tis true. 'Tis true.
Where you get back to being educated beyond your intelligence. Just say yes or no, this way, that way, and that would be it. And I guess just say no would be a good time to say Riggo out.